Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and today it is time to talk about what I read in October, or better said, as always, what I read in the second half of October, because I have of course already done a mid-month check-in, and usually at this point I share with you the books that I talked about in the mid-month check-in in like a stack. I hold the stack up here. I'll still share the books, but we have to split it into two stacks because there's too many books and I can't hold them up all at once. The first batch of the books that I read in the first half of October is this here. I reread The Way of Kings, which is the first book in a Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. I read a collection of short stories by Edgar Allan Poe, and I reread book 4 to book 7 in the Black Jewels series by Anne Bishop, so Dreams Made Flesh, The Invisible Ring, Tangled Webs, and The Shadow Queen. Moving on to the second stack, we have The History of the Kings of Britain by Geoffrey of Monmouth. We have Velvet Was the Night by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Wings of Shadow, the third and last book in the Crown of Feathers trilogy by Nikki Pau Preto. I reread Starsight, the second book in the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson, and I also read Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. And not gonna lie, some of these books I don't even remember that I read them in October because it seems like a very long time ago, but the amount of books I still have to talk about might be an explanation for that. Anyway, if you want to know the thoughts on any of the books that I just mentioned now, as always, the link to my mid-month check-in will be left in the description box down below and up there. So go and check that out. And now it's time to quit stalling because I'm scared of talking about the amount of books that I have to talk about still, and just get into it so we can get it over with. First, let's start with the easy stuff. As always, let's start with rereads, and I have quite a few of those luckily, and I can usually get through them quite quickly. First, I have Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, the second book in a Stormlight Archive series. I am finishing my reread of the entirety of the Cosmere because this year I joined a year-long Cosmere read-along, the Crab-along. And so yeah, with 2 months left, of course, we only have the last few Stormlight books left. I actually finished this in November, but you know, it was the 1st of November or the 2nd of November. It's not that important. But anyway, the Stormlight Archive series, I won't tell you too much what it's about because it's a way too complicated and big series to explain. Basically, it's an epic fantasy in the very most traditional sense of the word, although with some very nice character work added into it. And yeah, I'm just... See, I still love a lot of the characters, but also in the past few months and doing this reread, I have become intensely aware of not the faults Brandon Sanderson makes, but he has some aspects to his writing and world building that he's just really not good at. And those are the aspects that I usually enjoy the most in fantasy. So yeah, my reread is not giving me what I want from it. So while I can still love the characters, the story is a bit disappointing, not gonna lie, and then there's just some actively almost problematic shit in there. But once I'm done with my reread of the Cosmere of the Stormlight Archive series, I have intended, or I have made plans to upload a video talking about everything that bothers me about Brandon Sanderson now. So look forward to that, I guess. But yeah, it was a reread. Let's say it like that. It was a reread, I still enjoyed it, but there were also a lot of rants included while reading this that I sent to friends, so make of that what you will. Next, I want to talk about my reread of the Turlane Trilogy by Anne Bishop. This trilogy consists of Pillars of the World, Shadows and Light, and The House of Gaian. And basically what this series is about is you have like Earth, basically not Earth, but you know, you have the realm where the humans live, and above that you have Turlane where the Fae live. And suddenly pieces of Turlane start vanishing. And so the Fae are trying to find out why they are vanishing and what's up with that. And while looking for answers, they meet a young witch called Ari, who, even if she does not know the answers, might hold them in her family history. and might be the key to finding out why Turlane is vanishing. I read this after I finished my reread of the Black Jewel series because I needed more Anne Bishop, like ASAP, in my life. It's been a while since I reread the series, even though at least the last 2 books are some of my most reread books ever. I seriously read them a lot. And I have to say, I still really enjoy this series. It's a lot more basic than the Black Jewel series. It's very familiar, if you're familiar with the Black Jewel series, but that's just the thing with Anne Bishop in general, that if you know one of her series, you basically know all of them, because she tends to use the same tropes, the same story beats, the same type of characters. And so if you like those characters, like me, that's great. If you don't, you might get easily bored. But anyway, I'm gonna film a series review of this anyway, so I'll just talk about that then. Next, as I mentioned, I finished my reread of the Black Jewel series by Anne Bishop with Charlotte Joyce Lady, Twilight's Dawn and The Queen's Bargain, and then I went straight on and read the book that came out this year that for some reason I hadn't read yet, so that's The Queen's Weapon. And let me just put this down before it all falls down. So actually I know why I hadn't read The Queen's Weapon yet, and that is because The Queen's Bargain, which came out last year after a 9-year hiatus in the series, I wasn't the biggest fan of. There were a lot of things that I was pretty disappointed by. There were some decisions made on Anne Bishop's part that I wasn't the biggest fan of. But I have to say, on a reread, knowing what to expect from this book, I enjoyed it a lot more, and I could go into it a lot more open-minded, not having this intense, need for this book to hold up to the expectations that I have after 9 years of a hiatus in my favorite series of all time. You know what I mean? And so then The Queen's Weapon I also really, really enjoyed. And I just think, there's some elements that I think not a lot of people will like, but I gotta be honest, from book 5 onwards, maybe 6 onwards, this series is basically just a series for the people who really, really love the Black Jewels. There's not that many new things explored. There's a lot of recycled plot beats once again, but if you love the Black Jewels, then you don't need anything more, and that's exactly where I am. But maybe let me tell you a little bit about what the Black Jewels is about. The Black Jewels consists of the original trilogy, and then also, by now, how many? I don't know, 9? 8, 9 spin-offs or prequels or continuations of the story and so on. But the original trilogy is at its basis a Chosen One story. However, you don't follow the Chosen One, but you follow the people whose lives are changed by the existence of the Chosen One and who have sworn to protect her and to help her make the decisions that she needs to make to save the world. And so yeah, as I said, this is my favorite series of all time, and I just enjoy every single reread, and I might have teared up a little bit at the end of this book, realizing that next year we won't get a new book in the series, but we'll get a new book in the other series. And so I once again don't know when I'll get the next book in the Black Jewels world, and it makes me very, very sad and very desperate. Next, I have 2 non-fiction books to talk about. First, I have Das amerikanische Museum, Sklaverei, schwarze Geschichte und der Kampf um Gerechtigkeit in Museen der Südstaaten. Translated, this would mean the American Museum, Slavery, Black History, and the Fight for Justice in Museums of the South. And this is written by 2 Austrian authors, so I don't think it's translated into English. But yeah, this is a really, really interesting book. It's basically exactly what it says here in the front. And what the authors do is they went to different museums in the South dealing with Black history, dealing with different aspects of Black history, some with slavery, some with the civil rights movement, some with specific figures within Black history like Martin Luther King Jr. And basically each chapter deals with a different topic concerning Black history and concerning also Black contemporary history, and how museums, some of them Black owned, some of them not Black owned, some smaller and independent, some bigger museums, how these different museums deal with these topics. And it just, you know, puts those museums opposite each other, comparing how they deal with different things. And I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a very insightful and just very detailed non-fiction book. And so if you can understand German, I can definitely recommend it. But as I said, I don't think it was translated into English. And then the other non-fiction I read was Nairobi, Migration Shaping the City by Shadi Rabaran and Manuel Herz. This is a book that a friend of mine brought me for my birthday present from Venice, from the Biennale in Venice, the Architectural Biennale in Venice. And it's, once again, it's exactly what the title of the book says. It basically looks at Nairobi and the history of Nairobi and what migration and immigration did to the city and how it has formed how the city looks today. It's a lot less detailed than the other book. There's a lot of pictures in there, which I very much appreciate, and it's basically just a summary, as far as I understand it, of the thing that I think Switzerland introduced at the Biennale. But yeah, it's still really interesting and really insightful, and definitely makes me want to look more into the history of Nairobi. Next book I want to talk about is This Is How You Lose the Time War, and this book is a very short, almost novella, I believe it is. And in this one we follow two spies on two different sides of the time war, whatever that is. And basically they try to keep the other one from winning, and throughout their work they start exchanging letters and the two women slowly start falling in love. So this is a sapphic time war, enemies to lovers story, basically. Now, I enjoyed this, and I think, you know, objectively this is a 5-star novel because this is beautifully written. It's exactly what it wants to be. However, for me personally, at the time I read it, it wasn't quite what I needed it to be, because this is a lot of vibes, not a lot of substance. And so you don't really get a lot of world building, you don't really get that much character building, although the two characters still are very distinct. It's mostly just, you know, there's two characters exchanging letters, and then you get hints of the bigger world behind what's going on. And so I think if I read this at the right time, this could 100% be a 5-star novel. However, when I read this, I just needed more story in my books currently. I think I'm still in the type of mood, and I'm just not in the type of mood where vibes are enough for me when reading. And also, while sometimes beautiful writing is enough to sustain me, it wasn't quite there with the writing in this book. Like, it's undoubtedly absolutely beautiful writing, but not quite what I prefer in my writing as well. So yeah, basically what I'm saying is this is an absolutely amazing book. It just wasn't what I needed it to be at the moment when I read it. Next, I have two classics. First, I have Wizard of the Crow, which is absolutely impossible for me to explain what this is about, so I'll just read you the back of the story. To honor the ruler's birthday, the Free Republic of Aburidia set out to build a tower, a modern wonder of the world that will reach the gates of heaven. But behind this pillar of unity, a battle for control of the Aburidian people rages. Among the contenders, the eponymous wizard, an avatar of folklore and wisdom, the corrupt Christian ministry, and the nefarious global bank. So I read this for my video of international high fantasy. It's not really high fantasy. I'm not even sure if I would 100% categorize this as fantasy as it is. I think it falls more into the realm of magical realism, where you have real world things and then you have magical elements that are mostly used to comment on social issues. And so I will still talk about it more in that video, and I will still include it in my international fantasy video. But for now, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the writing, but this is once again one of those novels where I feel like I'm just lacking too much knowledge to 100% appreciate what this book is. And I'm lacking the background knowledge on both the author's life as well as, you know, situations in Africa. And I think he is from Kenya, so I'm just lacking the knowledge on Kenyan history and on the author's history, and so yeah, I might read up on that and then reread this sometime in the future, but we'll see. Second classic, I almost finished Kleist's collected plays. Kleist is a German playwright, novelist, writer, poet from the 19th century, I believe like beginning, middle of the 19th century. And in this little book we have collected all of his plays. I read almost all of them except for the last 3 because it just got too much for me. Because once again, while I do really appreciate Kleist, and I think Kleist has so many interesting themes, and also the way he deals with his female character for a writer at his time is just really, really interesting and very progressive in certain ways. Like, again, for the time. For the time and for a man at the time. I don't like reading plays. I'm just very much of the opinion plays are not meant to be read, plays are meant to be seen on stage, and because of that I just, you know, didn't have as much fun with it as I could have. Last book for today is The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. This is the second book in the Dandelion Dynasty, and this series, I don't know how to explain the series. This is set in a kind of steampunky, generally Asian inspired world. And at the beginning of the first book you have this empire that hasn't existed for very long, but you have this empire and this emperor who tries to oppress the people from the beforehand free kingdoms. And you have 2 characters who are very opposite in character from each other, who through fate are brought together and who start a rebellion against this big empire. And that's as much as I can say generally of the first book. And now I read the second book, and I have to say I think I love the second book even more than the first one. I mean, it's hard to say because the main character, or one of the main characters of the first book, I really, really enjoyed a lot. But a lot of the criticisms that I had in the first book, especially as concerns female characters, were very well remedied within this book. And I just love the way Ken Liu structures his stories, because he gives you something and he gives you the story, and then he retroactively gives you the information to, you know, put what you just read into context. But he manages to do it in a way that where you read the story without the context, it's not confusing. It just gets clearer the more you read. And it's kind of like a puzzle that is slowly, you know, making a picture, and you slowly see what's happening. And yeah, it's such a good series. It's very dense. There's so much information. It's definitely not a fast-paced fantasy, but if that's something you like and if that's something you're up to, highly recommend. It's very good, and the third book is coming out in November, so I cannot wait to read that one. And yeah, that was it. That was all the books that I finished in the second half of October. If you have any thoughts on any of the books I just mentioned, leave them in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out. All the links to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman or genderqueer person per month, will also be left linked down below, so go and check those out as well. In November we're reading When the Tiger Comes Down the Mountain by Ni Vo. It's the second book in her kind of novella series. However, according to the author, it can also be read as a standalone without reading the other one, which was Empress of Salt and Fortune first. So yeah, but even if you want to read both, you can still join us on our Discord. The channel for the first one, which was also a buddy read, is also still open, so it's 2 100-page books. I'm sure you can manage anyway if you're interested in joining. But yeah, with all of that said, I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!